If you think you've seen a lot of WWE matches, then just remember one thing: you are not Vince McMahon. The former overseer of all things WWE has seen more matches than just about anyone, and it comes as absolutely no surprise that somebody so notoriously temperamental might have let it be known when he saw one he didn't like. Let it be known is, in some cases, quite the understatement. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WWE matches Vince McMahon personally hated. Join us. Number 10, Randy Savage vs. Ric Flair on Primetime Wrestling. A televised world title match between Ric Flair and Randy Savage should, by default, have been no less than very good indeed. When the Macho Man defended the strap against the Nature Boy at a primetime wrestling taping on September 1st, 1992, however, Vince McMahon himself was so dismayed with what the two future Hall of Famers were doing out there that he ordered the match be stopped, summoned them to the back, and then sent them back out to do it again. Properly, this time. According to Flair, Vince was most irked with the amount of ringside meddling from Mr. Perfect and what he perceived as a low lack of effort overall. Slick Rick contends that Randy's heart wasn't in the bout since he had the hump about dropping the title that night. In any event, the two pros listened to their boss and did the whole thing over to his specification. It should also be noted that while Vince McMahon may not have hated their match at WrestleMania 8 months earlier, he was ticked off with Flair's decision to do a blade job during it in contravention of company policy at the time. Number 9, The Revival vs. The Good Brothers at Royal Rumble 2018. If you were one of the people who actually bothered to watch the Royal Rumble 2018 kickoff show, I'm willing to bet you'd struggle to remember any of the matches that took place on it, least of all the tag match between The Revival and The Good Brothers. Sandwiched between a 205 Live 6-man and Bobby Roode defending his United States title against the Great Mojo Rawley, their doubles contest went a shade under 10 minutes and was just fine. Not great, not terrible, just, fine. Not according to Vince McMahon, mind. Because, as per Dash Wilder, the WWE chairman told the foursome it was the worst wrestling match he had ever seen in his entire life. Yes, across 5 decades in the business and literally thousands upon thousands of matches, that was the worst one the genetic jackhammer had laid eyes upon. Harwood laughed off the criticism while speaking about the incident on his short-lived podcast, saying that he took the label as a badge of honor. The odds are high that Vince McMahon had a bee in his bonnet about something that day and likely forgot about the match as quickly as the fans. Number 8, Diesel vs. the British Bulldog at In Your House Great White North. Kevin Nash and Davey Boy Smith are both deserved members of the WWE Hall of Fame with long-lasting legacies in the wrestling industry. Paired with the right opponents, Big Daddy Cool and the British Bulldog could tear the house down. It's just that those opponents were usually Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, not each other. Headlining the 4th In Your House pay-per-view, Diesel and Bulldog had a deathly dull 20-minute stinker that, to make matters worse, ended in an unsatisfactory disqualification. According to Bret Hart's autobiography, Vince was so disgusted by what he saw from the commentators' table at ringside that he threw down his headset and stormed off muttering the word "horrible" once the match was over. Nash got chewed out after the fact, and the match pretty much sealed his fate as he dropped the world title to the Hitman at the Survivor Series pay-per-view a month later. When Vince got backstage, he continued his tirade by ripping producer Bruce Pritchard a new one. Davey Boy, for his part, reportedly realized how bad the bout which he was calling had been and apologized for it. Number 7, Cesaro vs. Gran Metalik on SmackDown. The global pandemic was a strange time for the entire world, but also in the wacky world of WWE. One of the only entertainment organizations to plow ahead in the face of a deadly virus, WWE continued to operate in front of 0 actual fans. While punters may not have been in the building, Vince McMahon would have been keenly aware that millions of isolating people were still watching his product from their homes. Thus, everything had to continue to run like clockwork and to the main man's liking. A report emerged following the September 18, 2020 edition of SmackDown that McMahon disliked a match between Cesaro and Gran Metalik so much that he at one point demanded they end it during the commercial break. That didn't end up happening, but it's believed that Vince managed to get 4 minutes shaved off an outing, which caused him to rant and rave at his monitor backstage. It was never revealed just why McMahon hated this particular match, which seemed to be perfectly acceptable if unexceptional, but it's always worth remembering that he is a crazy old billionaire prone to irrational mood swings. Number 6, Natalya vs. Shayna Baszler on Raw. It didn't take long for Shayna Baszler to be introduced to the quirks of WWE's head honcho after getting called up from NXT to Raw. In one of her first matches on the flagship show, Vince McMahon was so aghast at what Shayna and Natalya were doing that he demanded they try it all over again. Once more, this was during the global pandemic, and luckily the show was taped, so it's not like Vince interrupted a live TV show or anything, not that you would put it past him. Speaking about the incident during an appearance on the Oral Sessions podcast, the Queen of Spades told Renee Paquette that her boss was puzzled by their MMA-influenced grappling, telling them that it looked like you guys were just fighting each other. Shayna was a tad flummoxed by this critique, since she had just kind of assumed that that was the whole point, no? Natalya promised her less experienced opponent that she would make sure things were to Vince's taste on the second attempt, kicking off a long period where Baszler would try to wrestle for an audience of one, rather than attempting to have the best match possible. Number 5, Rhino vs. Tajiri at a SmackDown house show. Vince McMahon didn't typically make a habit of appearing at non-televised house shows, but he hit the road in summer of 2003 in an attempt to beef up attendances for SmackDown brand live events. You would think everyone in the locker room would be on their toes with the boss skulking around the hallways, but evidently that was not always the case. During a show at the Nassau Coliseum on August 31st, fans began chanting "boring" during a match between Rhino and Tajiri. The man-beast, as the heel, did as he was instructed to by road agents and sat on the hold, in theory to let fans get the chant out of their system so that they could transition into a more exciting sequence. McMahon, already irked after hearing boring chants during the tag team title match between the world's greatest tag team and the APA that had gone on previously, came out, cut a promo about how boring the match was, ordered both men to go to the back, and wheeled out the Divas for a bikini contest instead. Rhino felt humiliated and was angry afterwards, though he did later reveal that Vince beefed up his payoff as a way to subtly say sorry for the whole thing. Number 4, Dean Ambrose vs. Seth Rollins at TLC 2018. Seth Rollins has a history of having matches that didn't best please the boss. There was a bout against Kofi Kingston during his first run as WWE Champion that Vince ordered to be redone because he thought he gave Kofi too much offense during it. There was the infamous Hell in a Cell clanger with The Fiend, which left McMahon seething and Rollins wanting to strangle the owner of the company for placing him in such an unenviable position. And then there was this Intercontinental title match with former Shield stablemate Dean Ambrose at TLC 2018. Placed in the middle of a cracking Daniel Bryan vs. AJ Styles WWE title match and a barn-burning triple threat TLC main event for the Women's Championship, the Architect and the Lunatic Fringe produced a 23-minute slog that had fans chanting, "This is boring" and "We want Becky." In the back, Vince was reportedly furious with how the match played out and the reaction it received. The two men had proven chemistry with one another, but this was a definite off night for them, and the man in charge knew it. Number 3, Michael Cole vs. Jerry Lawler at WrestleMania 27. You have to feel for Jerry Lawler in a way. The King had waited patiently for eons to finally get his own proper WrestleMania moment and to be able to swap the announce booth for the squared circle on the grandest stage. Unfortunately for Lawler, his dance partner at the showcase of the Immortals was fellow commentator Michael Cole. You know, Michael Cole, the non-wrestler. Now, there were probably around 50 or so better ways that their match could have been planned out and executed, but it was what it was. And it was rubbish. I'd go as far to say flipping rubbish. And Vince knew it too, telling Cole, who had lost a tooth during the encounter, to go with the one he lost due to CM Punk horsing around earlier in the day, that it was the single worst thing he had seen in 60 whole years. I mean, I'd feel bad for Cole having insult heaped on top of injury like that, but McMahon did kind of have a point. Vince McMahon himself, of course, showed Cole how it was done by having a 5-star WrestleMania classic with Pat McAfee 11 years later. Number 2, JeriShow vs. Legacy at Night of Champions 2009. Chris Jericho is one, now former WWE star, who has been unafraid to make public his spats with Vince McMahon, either through his series of autobiographies or via his podcast. Y2J was a good soldier for WWE, pretty much always doing as he was told and never taking time off for injuries and such. Despite being easy to work with and consistently delivering in the ring, there were at least a few Chris Jericho matches that Vince had issues with. One of them was the opener of Night of Champions 2009, where Jericho and Big Show successfully defended their tag titles against Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase. It emerged after the event that McMahon threw a fit following the match, which included throwing his headset across the gorilla position. Vince Vince was supposedly critical of the contest's slower pace, figuring it would have been a bit livelier in a bid to get the crowd pumped up for the rest of the night's action. To be fair, throwing two heel tag teams out there might have had something to do with the tepid reaction, since fans didn't exactly have anyone to cheer for. Number 1, Kevin Owens vs Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 33. Another appearance from Chris Jericho to round things off, but it wasn't the Ayatollah of rock and roller who bore the brunt of his boss's wrath on this occasion. The first ever WWE Undisputed Champion was admittedly miffed about his United States title grudge match with Kevin Owens being put on second at WrestleMania 33, since the original plan, in his mind, had been for Jericho and Owens to be fighting over the Universal title in one of the headline attractions. Second match out seemed like an insult, but at least he got the thumbs up from Vinnie Mac when he got through the curtain after dropping the strap. The new champ wasn't so lucky. As shown during his candid WWE documentary, the prizefighter asked his boss if they were good, to which McMahon gave a blunt no. Worse still, McMahon told Owens it was the worst match in WrestleMania history later in the evening. That was according to Jericho, who theorized Vince was probably in a phase of being critical of the former NXT champion's work as a heel, as well as suggesting McMahon may have felt Owens was carrying a little extra weight at the time. Whatever the reason, the overwhelming negative feedback was a bitter pill to swallow. Don't worry about Kevin though. He would get his revenge soon enough.